Thank you, Chairman. I'm very honored to be here to be part of this important seminar. I'm still learning on this topic, and I have learned a lot from all these distinguished scholars in the morning, also in the afternoon. So my speech may includes three parts. One is my understanding of the current radical ideology, especially represented by the ISIS. And the second part is how China is combating the radical ideology. And also the third part is the how we can learn some lessons, and I will give some suggestions based on Chinese practices of combating the radical ideology. So I think that there are at least four prominent features of current radical ideology. The first is that it's very extreme and radical, so it opposes everything that is different from itself and inclines to get rid of the others in radical ways. So as a result, it often results in violence, especially the radical ideology of the ISIS. And take the ideology of ISIS as an example. It makes use of the religion as a cover, but in nature, it is anti-human, anti-society, and anti-civilization. So it calls for the elimination of the so-called infidels in its eyes with violence, and it objects the current international system, especially the basic concepts of democracy, nationalism, secularism, and so on. And also it wants to build a new world order. And second is it is very deceptive. So in order to win the sympathy and support from the general public, it always uses something as a cover. For example, the religious extremism uses religion as its cover. The Islamic radical groups disguises as the protector of Islam and distorts the true meanings of the Islamic teachings. And it claims that jihad is a religious obligation for every Muslim, and also through jihad one can go to heaven. And those who die for their cause will be served by 72 virgins when they go to heaven. So it's those, and due to the deceptive propaganda, some Muslims who may lack some religious knowledge, they are brainwashed gradually by this radical ideology. And also the third feature is that internet becomes the major platform for the radical propaganda, because the internet is a fast and efficient and cheap platform for the flow of communication, and everyone can easily get access to the internet for any information, and it is very hard to have some kind of control on the internet. So right now, there is a growing presence of radicals on the internet, especially by the terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The fourth feature is political motivation. The radical groups advocate radical ideology always has some political aim. Religious extremists, in the name of religion, spread radicals and extremist views, and they take extremist means to try to establish a state. And in the case of China, the terrorist groups in Xinjiang, they want to separate Xinjiang from China and establish some kind of independent state. And part two, how China counter radical ideology. And in recent years, radical ideology has become increasingly rampant in the international arena, and China is also impacted by this poisonous wave. And a growing number of Chinese Muslims are radicalized by the radical propaganda disseminated by ISIS, by Al-Qaeda, and also by the Eastern Turkestan terrorist groups. And in recent years, China has witnessed a series of high-profile terror attacks. I think many of them you have know this. Yes, for example, in 2013, in the capital city Beijing, there is a car bomb attack in the Tiananmen Square, and also there are some very high-profile attack in the southeastern part of China, in Yunnan province, also in the Urumqi city, the capital city of Xinjiang Autonomous Region. So China emphasizes the fight against the radical ideology due to a series of significant attacks in China. So China make it a major pillar of its counterterrorism strategy, especially since the year 2014, while China carries out the Strike Hard campaign against terrorism. Chinese government also implemented a systematic and comprehensive measures to combat radical ideology. And I think after about 3 years of work, the terrorist activities, especially in Xinjiang, have been decreased significantly. And there are at least 5 parts, I think, in China's combating radical ideology. First, countering the message of the terrorist groups. Because the radical ideology deludes and deceives the public, particularly the young people, with their fallacies. And some people are turned into extremists and terrorists due to their kind of radical propaganda. And because the Xinjiang autonomous region is the center for terrorist activities in China, so Xinjiang government puts up its propaganda to push back the radical ideology. Xinjiang government has doing a lot of work in this area, and it exposes the true face of radical ideology and its deceptive nature through television, all kinds of channels, to spread this kind of information for the public, and also in order to make the propaganda more persuasive for the public. The government encourages the religious figures to speak out, to tell the Muslims what is the true things about Islam, what is wrong, what is the lies about the radical ideology. And at the same time, the government helps to educate the Muslims on religious knowledge, because a lot of terrorists who are radicalized, they actually lack the basic knowledge of Islam, according to the investigation. So in China, many of the more channels are provided for the Muslims to learn about Islam. And second measure is, I think, is the promote of the religious figure to play a core role in combating radical ideology. In China's government's view, and I think in my personal view, religious figures are very critical in countering the radical ideology. So facing the widespread of radical ideology, it is also quite a demanding job for the religious figure to fight back efficiently. So Chinese government has some programs to improve the abilities of the religious figures to fight back. And since a decade ago, maybe there are several programs on operation, and since 2001 and to the year 2015, 12 training programs have been carried out, and it has trained more than 500 clerical personnel, especially for Xinjiang. And the third effort is to improve the people's well-being, because I think the poverty and the unemployment, things like this, are one of the factors that push the Muslims to be radicalized by the radical ideology. So Xinjiang government and the central government facilitates its economic and social development and implements livelihood projects, promotes common progress and prosperity, improves the living standard of the common people. And it achieved some good results. And you see, in 2009, the GDP in Xinjiang is about 400 billion RMB, and in 2015, it has doubled to 900 billion RMB. And the fourth effort is combating online radical propaganda, because one of the major terrorist groups facing China is the Turkestan Islamic Party, or it has another name, Eastern Turkestan Islamic Movement. It has been very active in the cyberspace, especially since 2008. It has a digital magazine called Islamic Turkestan, and it is published periodically, and it is still published right now. And also it produces and releases a large number of videos online. And in 2010 to 2013, the number of the videos produced by TIP is increasing significantly. In 2010, the number is 8, 2011, 13, 2012, 32, and in 2013, it reached to 109. So in this area, China is doing a lot of things to reverse this kind of trend.
Dr. Yan, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. And you see, in last year, December, China passed its national counterterrorism law. And in it, there is some articles especially targeting the use of the internet for the terrorist propaganda and other things. And just recently, China passed another important law, the cybersecurity law. It also has some more details in targeting the use of the internet by the terrorist groups. And also because Xinjiang is the major battleground, so Xinjiang local government also have its own regulations and laws to combat this kind of threat. And also there, in China, there is a systematic prisoner de-radicalization. And I will briefly talk about it. And in these programs, comprehensive program, there is at least 3 key elements. One is to encourage the religious figures to debate with the prisoners. And the second is to use the family connections to persuade the radicals kept in the prison to get rid of the radical ideology. And the third is the employment support after their release. So based on China's practices on combating the radical ideology, because you see, the US-led war against global terrorism has been lasting for more than 15 years, and there is no sign of victory. I think one of the problems lies in the lack of combating the radical ideology. So most of the country, including China, needs to do more work in this area. And I think counter-radical ideology is complicated, and it requires coordinated and whole-of-government efforts, like education, law enforcement, religion, finance, development. All these kind of agencies need to play their part, and also the general public have a critical role in combating the radical ideology. And also the preventive measures are very essential, because only very small part of Muslims are radicalized. The majority are moderates, they are very peaceful. So some measures need to be taken to prevent them to be influenced by the radical ideology. And also, it is important to set a clear line between what is radical ideology and what is moderate, what is normal, to tell the people so they can tell the difference and they can get rid of it or stay away from it when they come across it. And also, it is important for the law enforcement to know this because they need to deal with these kind of things. If they come across something, they must know what is radical ideology, what need to be dealt with, and we need to protect the moderate, the normal things. And lastly, China and the surrounding countries need to strengthen the cooperation on this issue, especially I think in combating the terrorist use of the internet. This is my major field because it's without borders on the internet, and in some less developed countries, they may lack the capability to combat on the virtual battleground. So India, China, and with the more capable countries, we can start a cooperation with maybe Afghanistan and some other countries on this issue. Together, we can have a better management of the internet and to push back the online propaganda by the ISIS and by other terrorist organizations. Thank you.